Working in a morgue might seem like a quiet job, until you realize not all bodies rest in peace. In this video, you'll hear bone-chilling morgue horror stories that'll mess with your head, like the one you're about to hear, where a rookie starts realizing something in there is testing his presence, and maybe he'd failed the test. But before we dive into the story, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a terrifying tale. Drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from. The first thing that hit me when I walked into the morgue was the smell. It wasn't just the usual whiff of disinfectant mixed with something heavier, no. It was like the air was thick with something ancient, something that didn't quite belong to this world. The white walls, almost bluish under the fluorescent lights, seemed to breathe slowly, as if the building itself was alive. And maybe it was. My name is Dan, and I had just landed a job at the Montreal morgue. I needed the money, and honestly, I thought it would be a breeze. Working nights, dealing with corpses, doing inventory. Nothing a guy like me couldn't handle. But the problem is never the dead you see. It's the ones you don't. On my first day, the boss handed me a key ring full of small, rusty keys. "These are for the steel drawers," he said, like he was explaining how to use a microwave. "Each body has its own. Never leave a key behind." I chuckled to myself. What kind of corpse was going to walk around, right? That's when it happened. I was alone in the storage room organizing some files when I heard a metallic clink. I turned slowly, and there it was, one of the keys, hanging on the hook, swaying by itself. There was no wind, no vibration. It was like someone had just brushed past it and given it a little nudge, a greeting. My blood ran cold. I stood there staring, waiting for it to stop. And it did. But the feeling that something, or someone, had just been watching me didn't go away. The next day I mentioned it to Rob, one of the old-timers there. He didn't even look up from his coffee. "Oh, that happens to every newbie," he said, like he was talking about the weather. "The spirits here like to check out the new guys. It's like a test." I swallowed hard. A test for what? Rob just smiled. "To see if you can handle what comes next." And what came next was worse. They put me on body inventory. Just checking tags and logging them into the system, easy stuff. But the storage room was cold in a way that wasn't natural. It wasn't the AC. It was something deeper, like the bodies themselves were exhaling that freezing temperature. That's where, in the middle of that endless row of drawers, I heard it. A voice, weak, almost a whisper, coming from somewhere behind me. "It's cold." I spun around so fast I almost slipped on the slick floor. No one was there, just the metal drawers, all closed, all silent. But I had heard it. And worse, the voice had come from the direction of drawer 17. My hands were shaking as I pulled up the record. Drawer 17 was empty. At least, that's what the system said. That's when I realized, in the morgue, stories aren't just stories. The colleagues had their own tales. Footsteps when no one was there. Whispers in empty hallways. Laughter in the middle of the night. And now, I was part of it. But nothing prepared me for what happened when drawer 17 opened by itself. I didn't want to go near drawer 17. Every fiber of my being screamed to get out of there, run and never look back. But something held me in place. A sick curiosity. That same impulse that makes you look at a car accident even when you know you shouldn't. My fingers hesitated before touching the cold metal of the drawer. It was slightly ajar, just a few inches, but enough to let out a smell of rotting flesh and something else. Sweet. Metallic. Blood. I took a deep breath and pulled. The drawer screeched, echoing in the empty room like a groan. And there it was. A body. Male, pale skin, almost bluish, eyes closed. But he wasn't in the system. No one had logged him in there. The tag on the drawer was blank. My heart was pounding so hard I swore it could be heard. And that's when I noticed. The corpse wasn't still. His chest rose and fell slowly, almost imperceptibly. What the? I leaned in, looking closer, and then, pop. One eye opened. It wasn't a natural movement. It was fast, abrupt, like something behind the eyelid had pushed its way out. The iris, cloudy and whitish, fixed on me, and then the mouth moved. "You saw." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I took a step back and tripped, falling hard on the floor. When I looked again, the drawer was closed, locked, as if nothing had happened. I got out of there fast, almost running, and went straight to the bathroom. I washed my face, trying to convince myself it was just exhaustion, lack of sleep, anything. But on the fogged-up mirror, written in the condensation, there was a word: come back. That night, the lights started flickering. Not the usual power flicker, no. It was rhythmic, like they were trying to send a message. 3 quick, 2 long, 1 quick again. Morse code? I didn't know enough to decipher it, but Rob did. When I told him the next day, the blood drained from his face. "Stop it," he cut in, looking around like he expected something to be listening. "This isn't a joke." "What do you mean?" I insisted. He hesitated, then whispered, "It's their call. And if the lights are flickering, it's because you've already been chosen." Before I could ask more, the radio in his pocket crackled. Emergency call in the prep room. Someone had left a drawer open. Drawer 17. The radio slipped from Rob's hand. He didn't need to say anything. I already knew we had to go there. Each step down the hallway felt heavier, like the air had turned to molasses. The prep room door was slightly ajar, and a dark figure moved inside. It wasn't a figure. It was him, the corpse from drawer 17, standing. His skin was even paler now, almost translucent, and his eyes, God, the eyes were just 2 black holes, too deep, like someone had scooped out everything inside and left only the void. His mouth opened slowly, and a whisper came out, but not from his throat. It was like the voice came from behind me, from inside the other drawers, from every corner at once. "You should have come back when we called." Rob grunted and threw the first thing he saw, a jar of formaldehyde, right at him. The glass shattered, but the corpse didn't flinch. He just smiled, and then the other drawers started to open. 1, 2, 5, all of them. Inside, the bodies were moving. We ran. I didn't think, didn't breathe, just ran like hell was on our heels, and maybe it was. The hallway seemed longer now, the lights flickering wildly, and I swear I heard laughter. High, shrill, like children playing. But there was no one there. When we finally reached the exit, the door was locked. The key wouldn't turn. Rob started banging on it, yelling for help, but I felt it before I heard it. That cold again, that smell of rotting flesh. He was behind us. I turned slowly. The corpse from drawer 17 was half a meter away, his head tilted to the side, like he was curious. His hand, cold with long, dirty nails, reached out toward me. I closed my eyes, and then... click. The door opened. The night security guard, a grumpy old man named Hank, looked at us like we were crazy. "What the hell is going on here?" he grumbled. We looked back. The hallway was empty. No open drawers, no standing corpse. Just the heavy silence of the morgue, like nothing had happened. Hank rolled his eyes. "Drunks," he muttered before turning away. Rob and I exchanged glances. We knew. It wasn't our imagination. It wasn't lack of sleep. Something in that place was watching us. And worse, now, it knew our names. I never went back to the night shift, but to this day when I pass by the morgue, I swear I see a shadow in the second-floor window. It waves. Weird, right? What did you think of the story? On a scale of 0 to 10, what would you rate it? Let me know in the comments below. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't what you see, but what you feel watching you. And the story you're about to see next shows exactly that. A morgue where the very air seemed to reject the presence of the living. Working in a morgue teaches you one thing. The dead are never truly alone. And I'm not talking about cadavers on the autopsy table or bodies awaiting release. I'm talking about what lingers in the corners, in the empty hallways, in the shadows that move too fast to just be shadows. You learn to live with the strange noises, the creaks, the sighs that aren't yours. But that night something changed. I was finishing up the paperwork from the last autopsy. That smell of disinfectant and old death clinging to the air, when I heard it. A loud thud coming from the laundry room. No big deal, right? It could have been a bucket falling, a hose slipping. But no, it was too loud, too heavy, like someone had thrown an entire body onto the floor. And the worst part? I knew there was no one there. The silence that followed was worse than the noise, that kind of quiet that weighs on your ears, like the air had turned into wet cotton. Even my breathing seemed too loud. I stood still, listening, waiting for another sign. Nothing. Just the hum of the fluorescent lights, that white light that makes everything look like a bad dream. But I couldn't ignore it. Rule number 1 of the morgue: anything out of the ordinary, you check it out. It could be a leak, a rat, or something else. I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the laundry room, my feet dragging on the concrete floor. Each step echoed, as if someone was walking with me. The laundry room door was ajar. Strange, because I always lock it. I pushed it open slowly, the cold doorknob burning my hand. The air inside was cold. Not the cold of air conditioning, but the kind that comes from within your bones, as if the room itself was trying to push me out. And then the lights flickered. Once, twice. On the third time, they stayed off for a second too long. When they came back on, I saw it. All the cabinets were open. All of them. Those metal doors wide open like mouths screaming silently. My heart raced, my hands sweating cold. I knew I had closed everything before leaving. I pulled out my phone, my hands trembling, and opened the camera. If there was something there, maybe I could capture it. I pointed it at the cabinets, at the dark corners, and clicked. Nothing. Just the empty shelves and my distorted shadows. But when I looked at the floor, I saw it. A stain. Dark, wet, spreading slowly. It wasn't water. It was too thick, too dark. And the smell. Old iron and something rotten. I approached, the flashlight trembling in my hand, and then I heard it. A cry, high-pitched like a baby's, coming from somewhere behind the cabinets. My blood turned to ice. There was no child there. There couldn't be. And yet the sound continued. Weak, sad, as if it were drowning in something. That's when the voices started. Whispers, low, coming from all directions at once. I couldn't make out the words, but I recognized one thing. Names. Names of employees who had worked there, and among them, mine. Something hit my rib, a dry shock as if I had been punched from the inside. I almost fell backward, the flashlight clattering to the floor. When I stood up, the cabinets were closed. All of them, as if nothing had happened. But the stain was still there. And the crying. Now it was coming from inside the wall. I'm not brave. I work with the dead, not ghosts. But at that moment, something inside me spoke louder than fear. I picked up the flashlight from the floor, the light trembling along with my hand, and approached the wall where the crying was coming from. The sound was low now, almost a moan. I placed my hand on the wall and felt it. Cold. Not the normal cold of concrete, but that icy burn, as if I were touching something I shouldn't. And then, a knock. Clear. Dry. Coming from inside the wall. My heart raced. It was impossible. There was no space there, no ducts, nothing. Just brick and cement. But another knock came, and another, as if someone were knocking from the other side. Who's there? My voice came out hoarse, almost a whisper. Silence. And then, 3 knocks. Clear. One after the other. Everyone who's ever heard a horror story knows what 3 knocks mean. But there, in that dimly lit room, with the smell of death in the air, it wasn't just a legend. It was real. Someone, or something, was answering. I tried to step back, but my legs wouldn't obey. The air was heavy as if I were underwater. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. On the laundry counter, a pen rolled by itself. Slowly, as if someone had carefully pushed it. It stopped at the edge and fell to the floor. The noise echoed like a gunshot. I wasn't alone. The crying stopped suddenly, cut off as if someone had covered the child's mouth, and in its place came a whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but the voice was wrong, too thin, too hoarse, as if it were made of several sounds glued together. "What do you want?" I asked, trying not to tremble. The silence returned. And then, the door behind me slammed shut. I turned around so fast I almost fell. The laundry room door, which had been open, was now closed, locked. And on the other side, something was scratching the wood, slowly, as if it were lightly running its fingers over it. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I almost screamed. When I pulled it out, I saw that the screen was full of interference, white streaks cutting through the image, and in the middle of them, a photo. A photo I hadn't taken. It was a shadow, dark, indistinct, but with a shape, almost human but not quite. It was in the corner of the laundry room where the cabinets were, and it seemed to be looking straight at me. The air got even colder. My breath came out in white clouds. And then, the last thing I expected happened. Someone called my name. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a distant voice. It was clear, distinct, as if it were right behind me. I didn't look. I couldn't, because deep down I knew, if I turned around I would see something from which there was no turning back. The light flickered again, and when it came back on, the door was open. The stain on the floor was gone, and the silence. That oppressive, heavy silence took over everything again. But one thing I knew. Something there wanted to talk to me, and I wasn't sure I wanted to listen. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but when you feel like something wants to get you, your feet decide for you. I left the laundry room so fast I almost tripped over my own steps. The morgue corridor had never seemed so long. The lights flickering, that darkness in the corners creeping, as if it were alive. I reached the break room and locked the door. My hands were trembling so much I could barely hold my phone. I looked at the photo again. The shadow was still there, but now, it was closer, as if it had taken a step forward when I wasn't looking. And then, the lights went out. It wasn't a blackout. It was as if someone had sucked all the energy out of the place. The silence became absolute. Even the hum of the freezers stopped. Just my heart beating in my chest, accelerated, as if it wanted to escape from me. Something scratched the door. It wasn't the sound of metal or wood. It was flesh. Nails running slowly as if it were taunting me. I shrank into the corner, holding my breath. The doorknob moved, slowly. Someone, or something, was trying to get in. "Go away," I whispered, my lips dry. The doorknob stopped. For a second, I thought it had worked. Then the door started to shake. Knocks, strong, violent. The wood creaked, the hinges groaning as if they were about to break. I covered my mouth to keep from screaming. There was nowhere to run, and suddenly, it stopped. The silence returned. The light, too, gradually, illuminating the room in flashes. I stayed there, crouched, waiting for the worst, until I heard it. A voice. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a moan. It was clear, feminine. And it came from my radio, which was turned off. "You promised." The blood froze in my veins. I had never heard that voice before, but it seemed familiar, like something I should remember, but my brain refused to let me. The radio turned on by itself, static, and then a laugh, low, hoarse, full of something that wasn't human. The door opened, not slowly, not dramatically, in one swift motion, as if something huge had hit it. But there was nothing there, just the dark corridor. And then, footsteps. Someone was coming, slowly, as if they knew I had nowhere to run. The last thing I remember is the smell, iron, rotten flesh, and something sweet, like wilted flowers, and the whispers, saying my name again and again and again, until everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of the break room. Daylight was already coming through the windows. Nothing was out of place, nothing broken. But in my pocket, the phone was open to a new photo. I was there, sleeping on the floor, and behind me, something smiling. What a horror. There are places that simply don't want to be invaded, and the laundry room was one of them. But what happens when what haunts is not confined to a room, but to the routine of those who work there? Like in the story you're about to see, where a spirit made the pharmacy its new home, and it's not happy with the visitors. I've been working at the pharmacy in St. Mary's Hospital for nearly 10 years, and if there's one thing I've learned in that time, it's that the dead don't always stay where you put them. The pharmacy is right next to the morgue, separated only by a narrow corridor and a heavy door that never seems to stay completely closed. Now, I'm not the type to believe in every ghost story I hear, but after what happened there, even the toughest skeptic would have a hard time doubting. It all started with the noises. Things falling on their own, glass breaking in the middle of the night, as if someone was there, playing tricks on us. At first, I thought it might be a rat or something, but when Lisa, my coworker, saw a medicine bottle fly off the shelf and shatter on the floor with no one around, we knew something was wrong, and it wasn't just any something. It was Elias. Yes, we gave it a name, because when you're dealing with a ghost that throws things, makes noise, and seems to have a macabre sense of humor, you either laugh or go crazy. Elias was our permanent guest in the morgue. Lisa was the first to see him clearly, a tall, pale figure with a somewhat suspicious demeanor, as if we were the intruders in his territory. And maybe we were. One night I was alone at the counter, organizing some orders, when I heard footsteps dragging from the morgue corridor. The door was closed, but I swear I felt something passing behind the frosted glass. Then came the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor, as if a gurney had moved on its own. My blood ran cold. When I looked again, there was nothing there. Just silence and that feeling that something was staring at me from the other side. Lisa had her own stories. Once she called me in the middle of the night, barely able to speak. "He's here." When I arrived, she was crouched behind the counter, her eyes filled with fear. "He came to the door and just stood there looking at me," she whispered. And he wasn't alone. And that's where things get worse, because Elias wasn't the only one. The morgue was full of them. Figures in the shadows, shapes that disappeared when you turned your head. Moans that echoed in the empty corridors as if someone was suffering inside. And the whispers. God, the whispers. They were low voices, almost inaudible, as if several people were talking on the other side of the wall. But when you stopped to listen, there was only silence. One night, I decided to record. I took my phone, left it on the counter pointing toward the morgue, and waited. Nothing. But when I gave up and went to grab the phone, the screen was full of static, and the audio, it was just white noise, but you could hear something underneath, as if someone was speaking very slowly. I deleted it right away. Other hospital staff had their own stories. The nurses swear that the beds move on their own in the middle of the night, as if the dead patients were turning in them. And it's not just that. Some have seen figures in the corridors, people with their backs turned who disappear when you approach. But the worst part is the feeling that something knows when you're there. As if the morgue were a living place, and we were just unwanted guests. Sometimes when I'm alone in the pharmacy, I feel that chill on the back of my neck, that weight in the air. And I know there's something on the other side of that door, waiting. And the scariest part? We never know when Elias, or anything else, will decide that the game is over. After that night when I tried to record the whispers, things only got worse. Elias was no longer just a playful spirit. He was getting stronger. Objects started falling more frequently, and they weren't just small bottles anymore. Once, an entire shelf collapsed in the middle of the night, as if someone had kicked it. Lisa almost quit her job after a chair dragged itself across the floor, scratching the tiles with a screech that sounded like a muffled scream. But the real terror began when the dead in the morgue decided to make their presence known. It was on a freezing night while I was organizing prescriptions behind the counter. The hospital was quiet, that heavy silence that only happens after 3 in the morning. That's when I heard it. Knocks, slow, metallic, coming from the morgue door. Knock, 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 as if someone was knocking from the inside. My heart raced. Lisa was in the break room and came running when she heard me shout. "What is it?" she asked, breathless. I pointed to the morgue door. It was locked from the outside, and the knocking continued. Knock, knock, knock. We called security, Raymond. a tough guy who had laughed at all our stories until that moment. When he arrived, the knocking had stopped. He gave a nervous laugh, opened the door, and looked inside. The morgue was empty, as always. But on the floor, right in the middle of the room, there was a wet stain in the shape of a footprint, as if someone had stepped out of one of the freezers and taken a step forward. Raymond didn't laugh after that. That same week, the moans started. They weren't just sighs or whispers anymore. They were human voices, crying, softly screaming, as if they were trapped somewhere between life and death. Lisa swore she heard someone say her name in a faint voice, coming from inside one of the body lockers. And then, one night, I saw them. I was finishing my shift when I felt that chill down my spine, that weight in the air. I looked down the morgue corridor and there they were. Figures. Not just Elias, but others, many others, all standing, looking at me. Some seemed almost solid. Others were just shadowy figures, as if the world couldn't decide if they existed or not. The morgue door was open. I don't know what gave me the courage, but I went there. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the madness of so much accumulated fear. But I went in. The air inside was cold, dead, and every step I took echoed as if the floor was warning me to turn back. That's when I heard it. "You shouldn't be here." The voice came from behind me. It was Elias. This time, he wasn't just a shadow. I could see his face, pale, his eyes deep like two dark holes. He wasn't alone. In the corners of the morgue, other figures moved, whispered, waited. I ran. I ran as if my life depended on it, and maybe it did. The morgue door slammed shut behind me with a bang that made the entire hospital tremble. The next day, I quit. Lisa did too. But sometimes when I pass by St. Mary's Hospital at night, I still look up at the morgue windows. And if I pay close attention, I can see them inside, looking back. Because the hospital isn't ours. It never was. It's theirs. Creepy, right? Some ghosts make themselves known with noises, others with whispers. But there are presences that announce themselves with a silence so heavy. It feels like it wants to swallow you whole. The story you're about to see next starts with a simple delivery and ends with a feeling that never went away. But before we continue with the story, if you've made it this far, it means you're enjoying our stories, so go ahead and leave a like to let YouTube know you enjoy this kind of content and don't want to miss any more horror stories. That fetus shouldn't have been warm. I've been working at the morgue for nearly 10 years and I've seen it all. Bodies in states that even science can't quite explain. Smells that stick to your soul, silences that echo louder than screams. But nothing prepared me for that night. It all started with an emergency call around 3 in the morning. The phone sliced through the silence like a knife, and the voice on the other end was tense, almost whispering. "We need you to pick up a fetus from the hospital. Spontaneous miscarriage case. It has to be now." Normally, these transports are straightforward. Basic protocol. Pick up the body, place it in the bag, take it to the morgue, and register it. No drama. But something about that call made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The urgency in the nurse's voice, the way she hesitated before hanging up, as if she was afraid to say too much. I arrived at the hospital and the atmosphere was heavy. The maternity ward corridor, which usually buzzes with life, seemed abandoned. Only one nurse was waiting for me, holding a small white package in her arms. She wouldn't meet my eyes when she handed it to me. She just said, "Be careful with him." With him? I found it odd. Usually in these situations, people refer to it as biological material, not as a person. But before I could ask, she turned her back and disappeared into the dimly lit corridor. I placed the package in the standard transport bag, cold and white. But when I closed the zipper, I felt something was off. The bag was warm, almost hot, and it wasn't the warmth of a recent body, no. It was as if something inside was alive. I got into the van and started the engine, but the heavy air inside the car wouldn't go away. That warmth coming from the back seat where the bag was made me break out in a cold sweat. And then, in the middle of the deserted road, I heard a sound. A slight scratch. I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding in my throat. I looked in the rearview mirror. The bag was intact, motionless. It was your imagination, I tried to convince myself. But when I started driving again, the noise came back. Scratch. Scratch. Something was moving inside that bag. I ran into the morgue, almost tripping up the stairs. I placed the package on the steel table, the cold that should have calmed anyone. But my hands were trembling. The zipper felt like it weighed a ton as I pulled it. And then I saw it. The fetus was small as expected, but the eyes... My God, the eyes. They were open. And they weren't cloudy, no. They were glassy, almost as if they were staring at me. And the mouth moved. No, it wasn't a reflex, it wasn't my brain playing tricks on me. I swear those tiny lips twitched as if trying to speak. I closed the bag in a blind panic and got out of there as if hell itself was after me. But even after locking the door, even after turning on all the lights, I knew. Something had come with me from that hospital. And now, no matter where I go, I feel it, watching, waiting. And the worst? I'm sure that any moment now it will answer. That warmth wouldn't go away. I tried to convince myself it had just been a reflex, a trick of the light, anything. But when I closed my eyes that night, all I saw was him. That tiny, lifeless face, but with eyes that seemed to burn inside the bag. The night was a nightmare. Every sound made me jump out of bed, the wind hitting the window, the creaking of the floor. Even my own heartbeat seemed to echo in my ears. And then, in the middle of the silence, I heard it. A voice. Weak. Almost a whisper. But it was there. It didn't come from anywhere, it just existed as if someone was breathing the words directly into my mind. "You brought me home," I screamed. My body reacted before my brain did, and I found myself standing in the middle of the room, sweating, trembling, my eyes wide open in the darkness. "This isn't happening," I repeated. But the air in the room was heavy, as if something was sucking all the oxygen out. I ran to the morgue. I don't know why. Maybe to prove to myself that it had just been my mind playing tricks on me. But when I entered the cold room, the bag was still there. And the zipper was open. I approached slowly, each step heavy with fear. The fetus was still there, but now it was different. The skin, once pale, was pinkish. And the tiny fingers, God, the tiny fingers, were slightly curled, as if they had moved. That's when I felt the touch. Something cold brushed against the back of my neck, and I turned around so fast I almost fell. Nothing there, just the emptiness of the morgue, the fluorescent lights flickering. But then, again, the voice, "You are mine now." This time it came from inside the bag. I didn't think. I grabbed the package, ran to the freezer and threw it inside, locking the door with all my might. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding like a drum. It's over, I thought. But then came the scratching. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Coming from inside the freezer. And worse, the metal began to dent, as if something was pushing from the inside. I didn't wait to see what would happen. I ran, left the morgue behind, and never went back. But to this day, when I'm alone in the dark, I feel a strange warmth on the back of my neck. And I hear a whisper. "You are still mine." Some stories don't end. They just stay. How scary. What did you think of the story? What rating from 0 to 10 would you give it? Leave your opinion in the comments below. I've seen a lot of bizarre things working at the Baltimore morgue. Bodies that wouldn't stay still. Unexplained sounds. That feeling of being watched when you know you're alone in the cold room. But nothing prepared me for what Marianne Voss brought into my life. She showed up on a rainy autumn day, the kind of rain that seems to wash away even the soul, or bring something dirty with it. I was finishing up preparing an elderly gentleman, a quiet case, a heart attack. Then the door slammed and she walked in with those green eyes that seemed to light up the place all by themselves. "You're Thomas, right?" "The preparer?" she asked, holding a brown folder against her chest as if she were afraid someone might snatch it away. I wiped my hands on my lab coat and nodded. "Yes, that's me. How can I help?" She took a deep breath, as if she were about to drop a bombshell. "My grandmother died last week, and she had a special last request. I thought it was something common, like a favorite dress for the burial or her hair styled in a specific way. But then she opened the folder and took out a document signed by a lawyer, stamped, everything in order. She wanted to be sewn up with red thread, red silk thread, and leave the casket open for 3 nights before the wake." I frowned. "That's unusual." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I know, but it's all here, authorized. And I can pay extra." I looked at the document again. Everything seemed legitimate, but there was something about it that made my stomach tighten. It wasn't just the strange request. It was the way she talked, the way her eyes sparkled when she mentioned the 3 nights. But money is money, and I had seen so much that a red thread wasn't going to scare me. "All right," I said. "I'll take care of it." She thanked me with a cold handshake, and I swear I felt something scratch my palm when our fingers parted. In the following days, Marianne started showing up more often. She brought coffee, asked how the work was going, laughed at my bad jokes. I'm not stupid. I knew she was getting closer, but I didn't complain. She was smart, beautiful, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone in that place full of the dead. Then came the night of the storm. I was closing the morgue when I heard a noise coming from the preparation room. A dragging sound, followed by a low moan. I grabbed a flashlight and went to check, thinking maybe a rat had gotten in. But when I opened the door, I almost dropped the flashlight. Marianne was there, standing next to the table where her grandmother's body should have been. Only the body was no longer lying down. It was sitting up. And the stitches I had made with the red thread, they were open, as if someone had torn them out. And worse, the corpse was bleeding. Dark, thick blood dripping from the open chest and onto the floor. "Marianne, what the hell is going on?" I yelled, backing away. She turned to me, and for the first time, I saw her real smile. It wasn't sweet anymore, it was hungry. "She just wanted what was hers, Thomas," she whispered. "And now I've come to get the rest." And before I could run, she picked up something from the table, something that wasn't a morgue instrument. It was a knife. And her grandmother's body? It winked at me. I froze when that corpse winked. My brain screamed at me to run, but my legs seemed rooted to the ground. Marianne held the knife with a terrifying naturalness, as if it were just another kitchen utensil. "Relax, Thomas," she said, advancing slowly. "It's not for you, not yet." Her grandmother's body moved again, the twisted fingers gripping the edge of the table. The red thread I had used to sew up the chest now hung like little snakes. And the blood, God, the blood wouldn't stop flowing. It was as if her heart was still beating in there. "What did you do?" I choked out, backing up until I hit the wall. She laughed, a sound that echoed in the cold room. Grandma always liked to give gifts, and she donated so generously in life. That's when I realized the body wasn't just bleeding, pieces were missing. The liver, the kidneys, all carefully removed as if someone had done surgical work. But the edges of the cuts were jagged, chewed. My throat closed up. "The organs," she gestured with the knife toward a cooler bag in the corner. "It's all in there, fresh." The disgust rose in my throat, but worse than that was the fear. Because Marianne didn't seem scared, she seemed excited, as if all of this were perfectly normal. That's when the morgue door slammed. "Thomas, you still there?" It was Vicente, my boss. His voice was accompanied by the sound of the rain outside. Marianne blinked, as if she had forgotten that the world existed beyond that room. In a reflex, I yelled, "Vicente, call the pole!" She moved too fast. A sharp blow and the flashlight flew from my hand, leaving me in the dark. I only felt her arm around my neck and a sweet smell of perfume mixed with iron. "Quiet," she whispered in my ear, "or I'll tell Vicente you stole the organs to sell on the black market." I swallowed hard. She had planned everything, the documents, the approach, even the storm, which now isolated us from the rest of the world. Vicente knocked again. "Thomas." She tightened her grip on my arm, and I felt the tip of the knife on my back. "Tell him everything's fine," she ordered. My voice came out shaky. It's all under control, Vicente. Just finishing up some paperwork." Silence. Then, "All right, we'll talk tomorrow." His footsteps faded away, and I almost collapsed. But Marianne didn't let go. "Good boy," she murmured. "Now let's go to my place. I have a special dinner to prepare." She pulled the cooler bag with one hand and dragged me with the other. I looked back at her grandmother's corpse, now motionless again on the table. But this time her lips were curved, as if they were smiling. Marianne's house smelled of roasted meat and something else. Metallic. She pushed me into the kitchen where a set table awaited, with candles and fine cutlery. The cooler bag was placed on the counter with a thud. "You're going to love the menu," she said, opening the refrigerator. My blood ran cold. Inside, vacuum-sealed, were pieces of meat that weren't beef neatly stacked. A label written "Liver 1012" in cursive made my stomach turn. "You're a killer," I whispered. She laughed, taking a bottle of red wine from the cellar. "And you're an ingredient, Thomas. But relax, it's not your turn yet." As she emptied the contents of the cooler bag onto a board, I saw my chance. Vicente's cell phone was still in my lab coat pocket. I moved my fingers slowly, blindly, trying to dial 911. The knife plunged into the wood inches from my hand. "Poor thing," she said, pulling the blade back. "Do you really want to ruin dinner?" That's when the kitchen windows trembled, knocking on the front door. Marianne frowned. "Did you call someone?" I shook my head, but my heart raced when I heard Vicente's voice outside. "Police! Open up immediately!" She growled, gripping the knife tightly. "Looks like the appetizer will arrive early." In that second of distraction, I acted. I grabbed the wine bottle and smashed it over her head. She fell to her knees, screaming, and I ran like a madman. The kitchen turned into a nightmare. Marianne got up, blood streaming down her face, but laughing. "You think this will stop me, Thomas?" "She won't let it." The back door was locked. I heard heavy footsteps in the living room, voices, the police. But then something cold grabbed my ankle. I looked down. Pale hands, full of red lines, came out from under the refrigerator. Her grandmother's voice whispered from nowhere, "Stay for dinner." The last thing I saw was Vicente bursting into the kitchen with 2 police officers, their guns pointed at Marianne, and the candles blowing out on their own. Marianne Voss was convicted of 9 murders. The newspapers called it the Baltimore Butcher Case. They never found her grandmother's organs. I went back to the morgue, but now I sleep with the lights on. Because sometimes when the silence is absolute, I hear a dragging sound coming from the cold room, and the sweet smell of perfume mixed with iron. There are some things you never forget, and after what happened with her, I think you understand why. If you're still here, you love diving into stories as bizarre as they are terrifying. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button. There's always more where this came from. Leave a comment with the silence. That's how I'll know you made it to the end with me. Oh, and if this video gripped you, smash that like button. Lets me know you want more of these stories that stick in your mind long after they're over. There's a video right over here that ties perfectly with this one. Click it and keep the nightmare going. The next story's waiting for you.